You're listening to Big World Network.
Accidental Passion, Episode 10, Stalking, read by Meagan Hedin. Warning: although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. It is intended for mature audiences only and should not be read if you are uncomfortable with graphic sexual intimacy. Kim got up from the dining room table, picking up her plate along with Kevin's, and took them into the kitchen. Since she had ended ties with Rick, she hadn't had any trouble letting go of him emotionally, but was having trouble in her efforts to reconnect with Kevin. The boys were away at friends, so she had cooked a special meal. She had decided to make another go of it, but even this very meal she had planned for the two of them had been a loss. She made her way to the sink inside. They just had nothing to talk about. Kevin didn't even want to talk about the kids anymore, let alone his work or dreams. She remembered when they were young, how they would spend hours into the late evening talking about their dreams and plans. Now it was just small talk. She also found her thoughts drifting off towards Ryan still, even though she knew she would probably never see him again and knew nothing about him. Once again she found herself sad and lonely as she glanced out the window above the sink to see if the snow had started flying as forecasted. She let go of one of the plates she was holding and it crashed into the sink. With a hand on the edge of the counter to steady herself, adrenaline flooded into Kim's body instantaneously from what she saw outside the window on the street. It was Rick's truck, driving by the house very slowly. She was sure of it. Before she could process her thoughts, she felt her cell phone vibrate in her pocket and removed it to see who was calling as the truck continued past the house. The caller ID showed an R, which was the way she had entered Rick's phone number. They had always been careful about calling and texting, especially when he knew she was home. Kim just stared at her phone, holding it in her hand. She couldn't answer, especially knowing Kevin was in the next room. Then it hit her. She had never told Rick where she lived, and now he was driving by her house. Kim knew she should be angry, but instead she was scared. She had been seeing an unpredictable side to Rick before things ended between them, and this was just one more confirmation of her observations. She wanted him out of her life and had to make it very clear to him. What had she gotten herself into, she wondered, and how was she going to put a definitive end to this? Ryan wasn't enjoying the evening as much as he should be. His publisher had introduced him to his date, Karen, the week before. She was attractive and presumably intelligent since she worked for the publishing company as an editor, and she was single, so he had asked her out. They had started the evening with a nice dinner at a small Italian bistro in a trendy part of Detroit's downtown. He had marginally enjoyed the conversation, and she looked very attractive wearing a short skirt and white blouse unbuttoned enough to expose cleavage. Everything about her was acceptable, but Ryan felt no spark. His heart didn't skip when he saw her, and there was no feeling of desire or attraction. There was no draw to want to get to know her better or learn everything he could about her. He had almost been bored at dinner, even after they finished a bottle of red wine. Ryan had arranged for a driver and car for the evening, so they took the black Mercedes to a nearby nightclub after dinner. There was some light flirting while they were in the car, but nothing more. Now, as they sat side by side in a booth, having had a few cocktails, their laughter increased in volume to compete with the music in large crowds, and the light flirting between them began to pick up. Sitting beside him, Karen seemed fascinated with his red hair, running her fingers through it as they laughed and talked. Running her hand up the inside of Ryan's leg to his crotch under the table, Karen whispered into his ear, "Let's get out of here." She took him by the hand and climbed out of the booth. Reluctantly, Ryan followed her through the nightclub to the front entrance, occasionally being recognized from his picture on the back cover of his best-selling novels. He would smile and nod and move on quickly, never quite comfortable with the recognition. It didn't bother him all the time, but he was never comfortable in the social scene venues, and didn't go out for the sake of improving his popularity and being seen, even when he was in LA. Although Ryan did have famous friends, it was just more by consequence than by any desire to associate with that crowd. Tonight was no different, and he knew being recognized was part of it all. What was interesting to him was watching when someone, male or female, recognized him. Inevitably, their eyes would immediately move to his date to see who the famous author was with, and what kind of date he had. He found it quite amusing. Tonight, although he felt no connection with Karen, she was a natural beauty in a superficial way, and he was almost proud to be seen with her, mostly because of the little insecurity with his own looks, of which he was extremely modest about, despite how women found him attractive. He always attributed the attraction to his fame. Eventually, they made it outside into the chilly Detroit night air and to the waiting black car. The driver opened the rear door for them and they climbed into the warmth. It was a sedan with no divider like a limo would have, so there was no privacy from the driver. But as Karen began to kiss Ryan's neck and run her hand over his shirt, the driver continued looking ahead, not even glancing in the mirror. A consummate professional. Karen was very quickly getting Ryan worked up, kissing his ear, running her hands all over him, including the hardening front of his slacks. She was pretty drunk and wild, and definitely not fitting the image of her daytime job as an editor, so for Ryan, it was time to put the brakes on. He had no intention of leading her on, doubting they would go out again, despite the arousal he was experiencing at the moment. She just wasn't what he was looking for. "We should probably slow down," he whispered. "I should take you home. It's getting late." He tried to sound as nice as possible. "Who cares about late? We have right now," Karen said, sliding her hand down to his lap again and wrapping her fingers around him through the thin fabric of his slacks, squeezing. Still feeling a little intoxicated himself, Ryan let out a slow moan. "I don't expect anything more than tonight," she finished. She leaned back into the seat, reached up under her short skirt, and slid her panties down over her legs, ankles and feet, tossing them onto the seat beside her. Rick knew he was rapidly approaching his point of no return, where he wouldn't have the discipline or self-control to stop. He wasn't overly sexually active, despite the opportunities he had with his fame as a writer, and tonight he was quickly moving past resistance. This was confirmed when Karen slid onto his lap facing him in the dark car, straddling his legs. Karen unzipped the thin suit material of his dress slacks and reached inside, wrapping her fingers around his shaft and maneuvering him out through the open fly. Scooting forward, her skirt hiding their intimate connection, she held onto him and guided him as she lowered herself onto his lap. His length made the position easy, and he let out a long, slow breath as he felt himself slide into her, feeling the first sensations of the tight warmth and wetness surrounding him. His eyes closed briefly. Then, as he put his hands on Karen's hips over her skirt, he opened his eyes again and glanced at the driver. Although it would look as though she was just sitting on his lap kissing him, Ryan had no doubt that the driver knew what they were really doing, especially considering the driver's apparent level of discreetness as he continued to look ahead at the road. Ryan made a mental note to tip him well tonight as his thoughts moved back to Karen, who was slowly sliding down on him again, taking all of him into her warmth. As she slowly rocked forward and back in his lap, Karen looked down at him, and Ryan had a flash of Kim's beautiful face. He knew it wasn't fair to this girl, but he couldn't help himself, imagining it being Kim sliding forward and back again, filling herself with him, looking down at him, grabbing his face, and kissing him deeply. He imagined her scent, touching her hips, thinking about her allowing him into her body and sharing themselves. He imagined it was Kim that was getting more excited, moving more purposefully, and gasping as he filled her completely with each forward movement. The thought of her, Kim, surrounded him tight like this, giving him so much pleasure, becoming so excited physically, brought Ryan to the edge. He could feel it building and knew that it would be in mere moments that he would let go. As he reached that moment, also feeling the first incredible spasm inside of Karen as she let out a simultaneous moan, Ryan knew he had to be with Kim, even though he had never chased after a woman before. He wanted to call out her name. As he continued to orgasm in streams of pleasure, Ryan gave in completely to thoughts of it being Kim that he was filling and simultaneously satisfying as his pleasure pulsed time and time again until he was finished and leaned back in his seat. As Karen kissed him on the cheek, smiling down at him before turning to lean back into the seat beside him, Ryan made a mental note to call a private detective friend in the morning who had helped him with one of his novels. He knew it was bordering on obsession, but he wanted to find Kim. He needed to know if it was possible that she was what was missing from his life.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on BigWorldNetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.